And actually, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because I know me.
And so that's our life mission. That's the McShin's mission.
You don't have to understand my boundaries to respect them.
Well, no, I'm the president and co-founder of McShin, a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorders.
How do you go about fixing the damage in the trust between the family after you get out?
Okay, I gotta work on that.
Celebrating my 6 months. Didn't have a cake.
Yeah.
Gosh, you showed up.
Hey, welcome to the Get in the Herd podcast brought to you by the McShin Foundation. My name's Art, and I'll be your host today. Today we have Adam Dwyer in with us. He was a participant in McShin. Must have been, like 6 months ago you were here?
Yeah. Oh, no, more like 8 or 9 months now. It's been
It's
a
been
while.
that long, yeah. So Adam came to McShin. When was that?
I came to McShin back in September of 21, I guess, and I lived here up until April of 22. And while I lived in the recovery housing, I also started volunteering up here and working up here, and I did a bunch of trainings up here. And shortly after I moved out, I stayed connected with the McShin family. And that's why I'm here today.
Nice. Appreciate you coming on today. Let's talk a little bit about your life before McShin and what it was exactly that brought you to McShin. Just tell me a little bit of like what life was like before.
Let's see. So life before McShin was pretty rough, pretty miserable. I grew up in a household full of drugs and whatnot, and just substance use, and it persisted throughout my entire childhood. And when as I got older and older, it just became more and more a bigger part of my life. And I lost my mother to an overdose when I was just 13, and that was really difficult for me. And it was a lot. It was very traumatic because I was the one that found her, and it made using more like almost like a redemption story. Like, oh, I got to follow in her path, even though she would always tell me, like, don't fall into what I've fallen into. Like, I need you to do well and rescue me out of this. But one thing that resonates throughout my whole childhood is because I'm pretty young. I always had this kind of internal battle between my home life was very like not conducive to building up a good life. It was very very hard there, but I always leaned in on my education and leaned in on the resources available at school, and that was somewhere where I could excel, where I felt safer. And so it was always like an internal struggle between which one do I lean more towards. And for a while it was school, for a while it was the life I was taught at home. But ultimately, like, I just kept going through, and by the time I got to high school, I wasn't really too present in my education. I would miss a lot of school. I would mess around at school and do things out.
Before we go to high school, so when you were 13, that's a pretty dramatic. Traumatic experience, and I can imagine that because I too lost my mom to an overdose, and I lost my brother too to an overdose. That happened within 9 months of each other. So I know how that is. I know how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
But at 13 years old, that's a whole nother thing too.
Yeah, I mean, it was the thing that
you almost lost your dad at the same time too,
yeah,
right?
The thing that is very that still brings me a lot of sadness is that it wasn't the first time. So in a way, I was prepared, which is really hard because I had to resuscitate one of them before, and I can remember being in like second grade and riding on the bus home and thinking like, man, like I I might lose one of my parents. And so there are a lot of instances where, the young child, I'm driving my parent to the hospital, or like I'm, sitting with them, like, carrying them to the bathroom, stuff like this. And, just, seeing like, I grew up with siblings, and so like we'd all seen them, and we'd all help out, but I was the youngest. And so by that time, I was the only one in the household pretty much. And, so, like, my mother was scheduled to go to a rehabilitation program, later in the next week. And my father, he had a bad substance use disorder, but he wasn't really willing to go to treatment. And so it was over the weekend, and I'd been out one day, and then I was sleeping, and I wake up the next morning, and one thing that I kind of like a traumatic tick, I like to think about it, that I developed over the years, is like every morning I would check on my parents. That was like the first thing I do in the morning when I wake up, is like check on them and make sure that they're alive, make sure they're breathing. And so I wake up, and I go and I check on them, and I see, oh, I mean, it was instantly like I knew my mother's like, oh, she's dead, and my father's sitting there overdosing too. So I had to
You could tell by just looking at her, because because like you were saying, you have dealt with this many
Mhm.
times before, overdoses, and that was kind of the same thing with me too. Is like there had been, just in that year, my mom had overdosed and gone to the hospital in like January, February, twice in March, and then she died in April.
Mhm.
So there was plenty of times when I'd go in there, kind of do the whole like keep her awake, keep her breathing, ice, whatever,
Yeah.
water on her face to keep her,
Mhm. Yeah,
until
exactly.
the paramedics got there. And then
Mhm.
that night that she died, I went in there and I looked at her, and my dad had called me downstairs. He's like, "Your mom's not, she's unconscious or whatever." And I went down there, and as soon as I looked at her, I was like, "Yeah, she's gone."
Mhm.
So it was kind of like that. You had already known, like,
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I can relate completely to that.
yeah,
Just like always caring for them, and being there for them. And like back then, there wasn't, like, Narcan wasn't as available,
mm,
and so it was harder to get. So a lot of times it was, throwing them in an ice bath, and
mm,
which is technically not good for an overdose, but
yeah,
like, whether it be that, or just tending to them, and like,
just doing
putting
whatever
them
you
putting
can
them
to,
in the right
yeah,
position, and
yeah,
then helping them breathe in whatever way they can.
yeah.
But yeah, and so it just kind of was an automatic response. Like I knew she was dead, and I was like, fuck, like I need to, call 911, and I need to get my dad straight. And luckily he survived. And, it's a blessing that he survived as well. But that was something that really has shaped my life going forward.
And this was an overdose from opiates.
Yes.
Okay.
hmm but yeah, and then so after that, I just um, that was in the middle of a school year, and that knocked me out for a while. The year after that, I really leaned in to that, school life, and I really, focused in on that, because I told myself, that like I saw where I was going, and I just it shook me so much that I said, like, I got to do what she had been asking me to do, not fall into this. And that was good for about 1 year. And then when I started high school, I was, I'd applied and gotten into this leadership program thing, and I was doing that, but it just, my mind was not at all on what, you know,
It should have been. I
what
was a
a
kid,
15-year-old,
yeah.
yeah, should be focused on. It was like, okay, what am I going to eat later today? Like, like, how am I going to get to work? So, just stuff like that. Like, I was focused on my life, not on school. Um, and then, so I went, ninth grade was very difficult for me. Because I had no support in my home life. All my siblings were moved out. My dad was still using, and it was just very difficult. And I was still trying to, process the loss of my mother. And my brother, he was living up in Washington D.C. at the time, and he decided to help me out. And so we were, doing applications to these schools out of state, and just reaching out. And he had some connections and whatnot, and I was lucky enough to be given an opportunity to go to a boarding school up in near Silver Spring, Maryland. And so I went there the next year, and it was an amazing change. It was great for me. I really started to feel like as that year was going on, I started to feel some healing and some growth within my own self. But all at the same time, I
That's a. Can we talk? So this is like 13, 14, going into high school, and then so what was your like drug situation then, or were you smoking weed? What were you?
yeah. So when I was yeah, right before I turned, right as I was turning 13, that was when I first started like actually using. And I started, one day I just been around it for so long, like I knew what things were and whatnot. And one day, I just decided like, I'm trying to smoke. I want to smoke. And so I smoked. And like one of the ways that I know that like I feel comfortable identifying myself as an addict is because within that first week of me, just deciding I want to smoke, I just went off. I drank the next day. I, you know, popped some oxys the next day, did
Yeah,
some Xanax. Like it was just
it was
immediate.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, it was like that. I, would mostly like smoke and drink, but I would also do other, harder drugs, opioids and benzos and whatnot. That's what I always enjoyed. And that persisted for a while. I actually, when I was in ninth grade and when I was having all these issues, reaching out to my brother, asking for help and whatnot, I cut down a lot on my using, and I really kind of eliminated it from my life for a little while, because I thought, that's what the issue is. I was telling myself, that's what the issue is. I just need to get away from all this. And that persisted until I got to the school up in Maryland for a while, and I think that's what made some of the transition there really, kind of seamless and positive.
Now, was this like a all guys boarding school, or was it?
No, so it was a an international Quaker school up in Maryland.
Okay.
Heavy international presence. Everyone I lived with in the dorm was, most everyone I lived with was from different countries all over the world.
Yeah.
And then they also had some, like just day students that lived in the, DC, Silver Spring,
Yeah.
Ashton area.
I went to a school. I went to I went to a military academy,
Mhm.
and it was kind of like that. It was in Wisconsin, and there was a lot of kids there from Mexico,
Mhm.
and actually from all over the place. But
Yeah.
and then they would have the day kids. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
But
pretty different than a military academy because it was technically Quaker, but it
which is
wasn't.
like a religion thing.
Yeah, Quaker is technically a denomination
Okay.
of Christianity, but it's there. There's a couple different types. There's like two different sections of Quakerism. One of them being more relaxed and just like living a peaceful community type of lifestyle, and then one of them leaning more towards Christianity. This one being the more relaxed. So while it was a Quaker school, it was more of a like historical Quaker area. So
Okay.
the Quakerism wasn't really like that present in the school. But it was still nice. Like it was just different. It was nice because it was different. And, there was more of an aspect of where community, where like you can approach your teachers and whatnot.
Yeah, and you were able to kind of just find yourself and be like a kid and focus on the things you should be focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice. Like I went there for academics and for, athletics. Like I played on their soccer team. I played on the main reason I was there was for the basketball team. And so I went through the season, and it was like a really, hot, like positive highlight for me. Because I grew up playing basketball, and so it was nice, because we really were a family there. But the thing that, I constantly go back to is at some point in the year, I started feeling more comfortable. And so I got distracted, and I, returned back to using.
While you were up
And
there?
while I was up there, but then also like because I had, a lot of, people down here that, that they need me to get them right and whatnot. Like eventually I started, coming back and forth between Richmond and, Maryland, and, I was just became preoccupied with that. It was gradual, but eventually that's really what it was. Is like, I wanted to use, and also like, I had business down here in Richmond and whatnot, and so it was just like back and forth kind of, and so I would, go home on the weekends and stuff like that, and I just constantly be preoccupied with it,
Yeah.
and that was detrimental because it didn't take me away too much at first, but it definitely like left me vulnerable to what later happened with my life. And so then the year ended, and I went back for my junior year, and junior year was even better. It was going great, but that was the year that the coronavirus pandemic hit
Oh, this was
America.
just recent, yeah.
Yeah.
Forget how. Yeah. So you're 20 now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just
20.
turned
So
20
yeah.
back in August, and yeah, so it's pretty recent. And
So what happened? So you guys all got sent home, or what?
yeah, like it was pretty wild actually, because a lot of people were a lot of the students there, not a lot, but like there was there are students there that were from China, and so we had been hearing about this, you know, this disease or this sickness that was spreading over there in China. And so I remember it was like a month or so before it really like even became any news in America. We did a a presentation in the auditorium about this coronavirus thing, and then so it hits America, and everyone's freaking out in the whole country.
Yeah.
What do we do? But in my life, it was really shocking, because I knew that the dorm would shut down. I knew that we'd have to go home, and I was pretty scared. Like I didn't know what I was going to do, because I didn't want to be back in Richmond full time, and I again with that internal battle of just like, I knew that leaning into this, my education, and this kind of new life that I was making was better for me. But like,
Because so at this point you were, sorry about that. So at this point you were kind of like doing good in school, doing the boarding school stuff, and then on the weekends coming home and living that other lifestyle. So, but you still had that option. So when the coronavirus hit, you knew that this was gonna not be an option anymore, and you were just gonna come back to Richmond, and
yeah, I mean,
that was yeah.
like I knew I'd still have my family up in Maryland, but it wouldn't be the same, because all of us would be disconnected. Um, and so I had to come back to Richmond, and at that point, I mean, I was pretty lost. School was online, and so that was like I wasn't gonna do that. It was nothing, and so I just went back to what I knew worked for me in the past, and what felt comfortable, and that was using and working and just making that lifestyle be my whole life. And
At this
that,
point, what you like 16, 17?
yeah, I think I would have been 16, about to turn 17, I think, or yeah, 17, about to turn 18 later that summer. And so it was pretty bad, because like as soon as I came back, I was just like, well, fuck, like I gotta make some money to support myself, and I gotta like do what I know feels comfortable. And I was also hurt because I had lost an opportunity that was so good for me, and I was just back in that traumatic environment. That was
So you came home, and we don't have to talk about it, but like, it sounds like, I mean, I could edit this out to you, but did you come back and start selling drugs, or?
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's pretty much what it was. Like it was pretty much up until this point. My father was still using, but he had begun to like stop somewhat. Um, but yeah, I mean, I came back, and I was selling drugs. I was using drugs, and I was pretty much just like fucking around. I would stay at his house, because he welcomed me, and he knew I needed like a place where I could, have Wi-Fi and use a computer and whatnot. But that was not my intention, was to be doing school, because
Yeah.
online I knew that it wouldn't really matter. Um, so I would, stay at friends' houses, stay at, my people's places and whatnot. And it was just like, it was pretty chaotic, because I really, was just kind of drifting. And I think a lot of people during that time were drifting.
Yeah, it was
Because,
tough, man. I remember
yeah.
that, man. Like things got really dark for me during that time.
Mhm.
A lot of isolating. I was already isolated before that, but when that hit, like I was just really isolated.
Mhm.
And I remember, yeah, man, just being in a room for like 2 years by myself.
Yeah.
But so so that happened. Was there a certain situation or like what happened that made you say like, man, this has got to change? Like what?
Yeah, so that year finished up, and it was summer, and then next year was coming up, and at that point I was in 12th grade, and I wanted to graduate, but I knew that it would all just be online again. And I was recognizing at that point, I was recognizing the pain that I was feeling, just a lot of, internal pain, um, and struggling, not feeling not right, I
Mm,
guess, like just feeling like something's wrong, but not being able to identify
yeah.
what's wrong, because I was so, strung out at that point, and just so deep within it. And I tried to like help myself a little bit, when that year started, because I knew that the like high school classes were very poorly organized online. But I, was like, all right, let me just sign up for some online, university classes. And so I was doing some at the at a local community college. And that first semester like started off strong, because I had that to focus on, and that kind of like centered me a little bit, calmed me down a little bit. But by the end of the semester I wasn't paying as much attention, and the high school wasn't on my mind at all.
Mm,
And then I didn't sign up for any more in the well I had there was a registration issue for the spring semester, because I had applied to a different university, but since I was still technically a high school student, they had an issue.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It was weird, because like I got accepted into this program, but my counselor at the high school had never had that, like had never worked in that with the university for that program. So there were some documents that weren't able to be signed, and I wasn't able to register. And then after that, I was just like, okay, this is like, I'm just biding time at this point. And so that semester went on, and it was pretty bad. And this is kind of where I guess maybe a climax is in the story,
Mm,
or a low point rather for me. I, I remember like I'm very close with my grandmother, and she means the world to me, and she's been a mentor in my life. She would always tell me that she was worried about me not graduating from high school.
mm,
And I always, kind of laughed it off, and, didn't know where she was coming from, because I said, my grades are fine for parts of the year. Like, I'm a strong student when I choose to be, or when
yeah.
I'm locked in. But as that year came to a close, I like hadn't realized that I was failing most of my classes. And um, so to backtrack a little bit, I on one morning, it was June 3rd, 21. I was out all night, and running around, and then I had some stuff planned out, and so I was with my friend, but he had passed out, and so I brought him into the house. And then I was waiting on one of my other homies to call me, and so he calls me, and so I go, and we're together for a little bit. And then I'm finally like starting to come down a little bit, and I'm done. So I have some free time, so I was just going to go back to the house. And um, I was like, okay, I'm pretty tired, I'm getting pretty tired, like let me just take a little bump. um,
bump of
hair, or what I thought was heroin. Well, I mean, I knew it wasn't heroin. Like, I knew it wasn't clean, but just, you know,
probably
like a
had
dope.
fentanyl on it.
Yeah, just,
Okay.
you know, some
Yeah.
dope. And so I said, like, let me just take a little bump real quick, get me home. And I overdosed in my car. And I wake up to being arrested because I had, you know, a bottle of dope on me and was overdosing in my car. And I'm lucky that I'm alive because I was in a like an assisted living neighborhood, like a nursing neighborhood. And so one of the elderly people saw me, and they called emergency services, and they resuscitated me. It took me three doses of Narcan to get me up. And I mean, that's a scary thought, and that's something that I still battle with every day. It's like I really let myself become that close, and I think there was a subconscious desire to, because I never intended. I've never had suicidal ideations. That's not something that I've dealt with. But I think there was a subconscious desire of, like, I missed my mother so much, and I felt that I was, you know, kind of wrong. Something was taken from me, and I wanted to kind of see like what it was, you know, see
kind of like
what her experience was, and like why it happened.
Kind of not like intentionally trying to, you know, commit suicide, but kind of like if it happens, it happens. Like, you know,
in a way, I mean, I didn't think I was gonna overdose
Yeah.
that morning, but I did, and I think reflecting back on it, I think the whole like process I was going through was like somewhat, you know, trying to figure out like why it was, you know, why my parents had, you know, done this in a way. But also it was just, you know, the societal aspect of you know, of addiction and whatnot, and it's just kind of bred into certain people, bred
yeah,
into communities.
I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Kind of like why like my mom was the way she was, and you know, when she was clean and sober, you know, which was very far in between. She was there, she was like good mom, like PTA mom kind of thing, you know. And I don't even think she knew why she did it, you know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why I use drugs, you know. um like now I'm starting to figure out, you know, what some of the insecurities are with me, and like confidence and things like that. But I think a lot of the time we just, you know, it's genetic too, you know, just the way we're hardwired.
Yeah, I think
So
addiction is multifaceted in the way that is what causes it, and what makes it worse or not as bad in certain people than others. But it's a very troubling disease, and it's something that you know, I'm dedicating a lot of my life to helping out in our country and around the world.
Yeah, man. Well, I want to. Yeah, we'll get into that real quick. But let's just talk a little bit about. So you overdosed in your car. You Narcan 3 times to bring you back. Where you wake up in the hospital.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was in. I was. I don't even know, honestly, because it's bits and pieces. I wake up, and you know, being told I'm under arrest, and I'm saying, like, you know, like taking my possessions from me, and then I'm in the hospital briefly, and then I'm being taken to processing. So it's very fast and very confusing day.
Yeah,
Because
you're out of it too. Yeah.
yeah, and it was the first time that I overdosed, so I didn't know exactly what that feeling of you know, being Narcan, being
Yeah,
resuscitated
I still
was
don't know what
like.
Narcan means. Like I don't know how, but I've never overdosed. I have overdosed. I'm pretty sure like one time like I did a shot of heroin and meth, and um it was like 7:30 in the morning, and then 7:30 at night I woke up and I was on the bathroom floor the whole time. And to me that's an overdose.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I had a lot of like instances where there's lost time, or that I just like, you know, was out.
Yeah.
But never had to be Narcan
Yeah.
before.
So
So they called my sister, and you know, she was freaking out, but she, you know, thankfully she, helped me post bail. And so I get out later that night, and
What were you charged with? Possession, or that's a
possession.
lot too.
Yeah, I had possession. I had DUI, and I had a fake ID on me.
Yeah.
And so I was charged with that stuff. I'm lucky because I probably shouldn't say this. I had some other stuff in the car, like a little bit more hidden, but because the dope was just like right there on the center console next to me, I don't think they really like looked around for more.
Yeah, they probably this is it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all we need to charge them. So let's just do that. Yeah.
But yeah, they did let me post bail because I think they could tell that I was like gonna be sick as shit and whatnot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that like I overdose.
And you had no charges before this either, so
No, I mean I had evaded arrest a bunch of times. Like I, gotten by just very like
yeah,
off the skin of my teeth. But this was the first time that I, actually got arrested.
that probably had a lot to do with it too. Like first offense.
Yeah, yeah. And so I go home later that evening, and I was like fuck, like what have I got myself into? And I hit up a couple of my homies, and because they were wondering where I was at, and they had heard bits and pieces, and I said, this what happened, like come through, and like bring some dope. And so I did a little bit more that evening just to like calm me down, because I was all over the place. And then but then I was like, I'm not, I told myself I'm not going to do it again, because I knew that I would, have pretrial stuff coming up, and, all that. So at first it was kind of just like, all right, let me make sure I can get a clean urine, because I think that might help me. But then, so I was sat in my house. I had this little camping mat, and I was just, staying on that on the floor for 4 or 5 days, detoxing off everything, and just I mean how it is, just sick as hell. But I didn't want to go to do like a medical detox, just because I don't know, I just wanted to be home.
Yeah.
But it was pretty miserable. But I was around this time that I started thinking about things regarding recovery, and I was reaching out to my brother a lot, and this is where a good part of my story comes in. Is so my mother was, she would get into recovery for bits and pieces of time, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and I remember as a little kid, she would, take me to NA meetings and AA meetings and whatnot. And so I knew a little bit about like what recovery was, but I had never experienced it on my own accord or as, an adult. And another thing is that she was good friends with John Schinholzer here.
Oh, okay.
And so I knew what McShin was. I remembered him.
Did your mom ever go through McShin?
She never stayed here in the residential, like in the intensive or residential program, but she was connected, for a while.
Yeah.
But that's one thing John always, tells me is like, I respect you because you're actually doing it. Like your mother would never, commit. And I mean, it's hard because she, was raising 5 kids.
Yeah.
She worked as a pharmacist, so she always had, really weird hours and whatnot, but also like it would have been worth it for her. And I think maybe she was just scared of committing to recovery.
It's not easy.
It's not easy at all. Yeah. So I and that was early June. That was on a Thursday when I overdosed and was arrested, and my graduation was scheduled for Monday, that next Monday. And I did not know whether I was graduating or not, because I literally had not been connected in school for a couple months at that point. Like I had not done anything, checked my emails or, been in there or anything. And so on that next morning, I'm, like I'm not high, but I'm, going to start feeling the effects of withdrawing from everything. And I'm still like all frazzled from, the overdose. And I go up in there because I needed to figure out whether I was graduating or not. And I'm, teary eyed because I'm like, what have I gotten myself
Yeah.
into? Like
Yeah.
it all kind
It's
of
a lot,
came
yeah.
and crashed. I was lying to myself for so long about my situation isn't that bad. It's not that serious. And that was kind of like an all culminating moment of like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's bad.
yeah. And so I go up in there and I'm talking to my counselor. I'm like, so, like, can I please graduate or what's the deal? And she said, she looked at me and she said, because she knew my sister and she knew about my story a little bit and with my mother and my father at least. And she said, like, I got you, like, you're going to graduate.
Yeah.
And she helped me out a lot. She just said that I needed to go talk to a few of my teachers and make sure everything's, do a couple things for them. And and then she said, like, you can go pick up your robes because I hadn't picked up my robes or anything.
Oh, you were able to even go walk.
Yeah. And so, and then I go to each one of my teachers and, I'm talking to them and they give me a few assignments, like just a few tests that I had to take over the weekend and they wish me luck. And, they empathize with how messed up of a year and a half it had been for students. And, so then I go and so I'm at this point I'm, it's like sat and I'm starting, I'm full in it, but I have to get these tests done to graduate. So I'm, like puking a little bit. I'm sweating a lot. I'm sick all weekend, but I'm getting these tests done because I wanted to graduate. Because I didn't always work hard in school, but like I did at other times. So I felt it was right. And then on the, that following Monday, I'd finished everything. So I went and I walked and it was funny because it wasn't like done by ranking or anything, but just the way, like the place that I lined up in, I ended up actually being like the last person to walk. And I remember watching the video and like, I just looked so sick in it. My face looked like it was made out of clay and I was just like thin as bones. And I mean, it was bad, but,
You still have that video somewhere?
Yeah, I do.
Probably good to check it every once in a while and remind yourself, yeah.
So at this point, I was so to backtrack, not to backtrack, but to go back to what I was saying. I'd been talking to my brother a little bit, thinking in my own head, and I was like, maybe maybe I'll check out this recovery stuff that my mom kind of exposed me to as a kid and learn some more about it. So I call up John. I get his number and I call up John, and I'm telling him, what's been happening and what happened with me just recently, and he tells me to come up here sometime and whatnot. And so I start just like keeping it real simple. I was just biking. I would one thing that, and this is kind of the start of my recovery journey is I'm really big on recovery goals. That's something that like has always kept me going, literally from day one. And so that first summer, I would write down in my notebook, like, okay, today I'm going to, bike to this meeting. And I got to stop at the grocery store and get, some walnuts and some Brussels sprouts. Or I'd say like, I need to, go to this meeting and I've got this appointment and like, that's all I would, and I'd write down something fun. Like I want to watch this movie or, I want to go to the basketball court and shoot
Just little
around.
things that like, that regular people do.
Yeah. And like, that's really what it was. Is I kept it very simple at the beginning. And, but I would always write down these little goals for myself. And so I was going to meetings every day, sometimes, twice a day.
And at this time you had already gone through McShin?
No, I didn't do the intensive program here at McShin. So this is like June 21. And
so you just moved into sober living?
Yeah, well, so I did. I started going to meetings, and I was doing some research with my brother on different residential programs that I could do that, like, insurance would cover, and that I could afford, and that would be good for me, and also having to deal with the charges that I'd gotten, and figuring out, can I go to a residential program, and having to work with that. But in the meantime, so I was doing all that, but I was just like, I was focused on like just going to meetings, and just
Yeah.
figuring out what this plan I was going to have. Actually, one story I'd like to tell is, so the first meeting that I went to on my own, um, it was in church basement. I still don't like this church basement, but it's church basement
Classic
on West
meeting.
Franklin. Yeah,
Church basement,
classic.
yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm enjoying the meeting, and a lady walks in a little bit late, and she walks in with a friend, and they're sitting there. And then after the meeting, I'm smoking a cigarette and getting ready to leave, and she kind of comes up to me, and she's looking at me with a little bit of a weird face, kind of like an "I know you" face.
Mm.
Um, and she says, "You look familiar. It's nice to see you here. What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Adam." And she's trying to think of where she knows me from, and um, I say, like, "Do you know Kim Dwyer, perhaps?" And she says, "Oh my gosh, like,
Your mom.
you're her son?
Mm.
I remember you." And it turns out that they had the same sponsor for a while, John's wife Carol,
Mm.
and that they were good friends for a while. And so I started hanging, and her name was Tammy. I started hanging
So
out.
Carol sponsored your mom.
Yeah, Carol's
Ah.
sponsored my mom. That's another reason why, like, I, felt that I could reach out to John
Yeah.
and Carol, because they knew us well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I would start going to meetings with Tammy, and I was talking to her a lot. Like, that was the first person in my recovery network, and then it just grew a little bit more. And I found, after about a month or so of just waiting, like doing research with my brother, waiting to hear back about court stuff, I was able to go to a residential program, and so I went there. But all in my head, I kind of kept it to myself a little bit from, like, from my family. But in my head, I had written down a list of bigger recovery goals. I'd still keep it simple every day, have goals, but I had a little bit more of a longer term plan. And I told myself, I'm gonna, like, go to meetings up until, and just like meet people up until I can go to treatment. And then I'm gonna go to the residential treatment. And as soon as I get back, the night that I get back, I'm gonna go to McShin sober living, because I'd been talking with John, so I knew what it was like, and I knew I could do that, and I wanted to do it. That's the other thing, is that I wanted to do it, because at this point it wasn't about just getting through these charges. It was an internal desire of, like, I couldn't believe how far things had gotten, and I finally was starting to recognize why, like, where some of this pain
Yeah.
that I alluded to earlier was coming from. So I told myself, go to treatment, move into sober living, and then once I'm there, like, I'm just gonna, settle down there, and really, like, change my lifestyle to this recovery lifestyle, and learn more and more about it, and meet more and more people. And that's exactly what I did.
That's awesome. It sounds like you made a commitment early on just to do something
Yeah,
about
just
it.
to at least see, like, at
Yeah.
least, see what it's
See
about.
it through too.
Mhm.
Give it a full, give it everything, just to see, because that's the thing is, that's what I tell people sometimes is like you have your whole life to like continue using drugs or drinking or do whatever you want to do. You won't have that many chances to get clean and to go through recovery. Why don't, while you do recovery, give it your all, go all in. That way, if you do decide to go back to drugs or something like that later on, you could say, you know what, I gave it my all with recovery. Like, I tried, like, I didn't half-ass it, like, and it's just not for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just put it all out there, and then I want to say 10 times out of 10 you're gonna realize that it's worth it, and you're gonna want to stay in recovery.
I mean, I think that's very true, and I even know people who like were in recovery at some point, pretty heavily, in recovery, and were committed to it, but then eventually, got out of it, and would start drinking again,
Mm.
or like smoke some weed again, or just do things here and there, and like, well, one, they're usually not as happy as they were,
Mm.
but also like if I when I talk to them, it always seems like they still carry something about recovery,
Yeah.
or they use something that they learned in recovery in their life still.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, not to judge them or anything, I think harm reduction
Yeah.
is a great thing. I don't judge people who use, and so I'm still happy for those people.
Yeah.
If you can bring one thing away from, if you live in sober living for 2 months, 3 months, and you're just doing it for court. But if you move out after that, 2-3 months, and you just remember one positive thing, if you carry one thing away from that experience, then I think it's a positive experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And then also one thing too is like I remember this being pretty upset and pissed off about this, but going to AA in the beginning kind of ruined it for me. It ruined the high and the drinking for me, because after I don't know what the saying is, but like after you have some recovery and you know that there's another option, and you go out and drink or use, um, the guilt, like you know better.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, but that's you cross a line, and it just kind of changes after that.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good thing, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, harm reduction, man, like all that stuff is whatever it takes for you not to die, or to, and that's the biggest thing right now is, people aren't using and just living a lifestyle. People are using and dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's crazy. I feel like
yeah.
that every other week I read about, some mass overdose somewhere, or just like how the numbers are continuing to rise. I recently read an article about xylazine crank, and it was talking about just like what it does, why it kills people, and whatnot. And the thing that really made me sad is that nowhere in the article did it mention tolazine, and tolazine is to xylazine what Narcan is to fentanyl. It's a reversal agent, and it can revive people. And currently, it's not being it's not approved by the FDA. It's not approved for human consumption. They're not doing much research at all.
Because xylazine is a horse tranquilizer. So
yeah, like xylazine is used in veterinary hospitals just fine, and it doesn't affect animals the way it affects humans. But for humans, it's very lethal, and
that's crazy though. Like, just because it's for animals, like it's something that could save lives. That's all that red tape.
Yeah,
stuff,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like they could fast track something to get developed so that they sell kits that have Narcan and tolazine in it, and they're not doing it. It'll come eventually.
That's a whole other thing, yeah.
But
so you got into so you were doing the meetings, and then you decided to come to sober living here. Did you go straight to New York house?
Yeah, I literally got back from the treatment center I was at in North Carolina.
Which one did you go to?
I went to this one called Red Oak. It was for like young children. They hooked us up with like less money, like that. They wanted me to go there, and because my brother. One thing about my brother, he's so important in my life, but he always knows how to like get a good deal. Stuff and whatnot.
It's good quality.
So, but he did a lot of outreach with me, and so I was able to go there, and it was a good experience there.
Was it like a wilderness program, or was it just a regular residential?
A little bit. It was mostly a regular residential, but on weekends, like sometimes we would go camping.
Okay.
But the best thing about it, for me, like the biggest experience or the best experience I had was I was able to do a solo camping trip there. So for a week, I went out and
it's like a vision quest.
Yeah, that's kind of.
I went to a wilderness program in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and I did the same thing. I had like it was a wilderness program,
Mhm.
so we would go camping for a couple weeks at a time, but with everybody, and then go back to base camp, and then go back out. And then at one point, we did what they call a vision quest. We would go out there 3 days by ourselves
Yeah,
in the woods and just kind of just
yeah.
be out there.
It was cool. I ended the program with that, and I was out there for 5 days, and it was a really good experience for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then so I get off the plane, and I had it set up. I had my brother talk with Joyce, and they had a bed set up for me at New York.
It's important to have a plan after
Mhm.
treatment, is to have plans set for when you
Yeah.
come back, where you're gonna go, what are you gonna do, what meetings,
And I remember because I had everything that I needed with me, and I remember I called my friend to pick me up, and there was a little bit of hesitation for a moment, and I remember this so well. It wasn't a hesitation like, oh, I want to go use, like I'm free from that program now. It was just that I didn't, for some reason, I want to go to the house that night. I wanted to hang out with my friends
Hmm.
for the night, and so we went and we stopped in a gas station and got a couple drinks, sodas, not
Yeah.
drinks, and we smoked a few cigarettes, and then you know I was like, actually, like, I am gonna go,
Mm.
and so I ended up going, and I felt bad because I kept Matt G up super late that night because my plane didn't land
Matt G,
until like 11 or 12, and he was the house leader at that point. So I go in there and I make the bed, put my stuff down, and I sleep because it was pretty late. And I remember I woke up in the morning, and I mean, it was so late, like I didn't turn any lights on or anything. I just went to the room because I didn't want to wake a bunch of people up. So I get up in the morning and I walk out and I go to the kitchen to get some water, and I see Danny. Did you?
Danny, yeah.
Yeah. I see Danny on the couch, but he's like face down on the
Mm.
couch, and so Danny, he was an older man that lived in our house, and he lived there for a long time.
Rode a motorcycle,
Rode a
like in the
motorcycle.
winter too,
Yeah,
just out there. Yeah.
Danny was really cool,
Yeah.
but he was wearing like kind of cartoon pajamas or something,
Yeah.
like really colorful, and he had, how he had like the kind of longer white hair.
Yeah.
I like on first glance I thought it was a woman, and I was really confused. So I was like, wait. Um, but then a little bit later he got up and he introduced himself to me and it turned out that he was my roommate.
Yeah.
So we got to know each other a little bit.
This is at New York House, which is not in New York. It's here
Yeah.
in Virginia, in Richmond. It's in Glen Allen, and it is it's one of the sober living houses that McShin has. So
Yeah, and then so just like from there I was kind of getting into the McShin routine, I guess, of going to the Wednesday meetings, and so I was going to NA meetings each day, and just meeting new people and doing a little bit of like side work, just landscaping stuff with some of my friends, and but I was, after a couple weeks of that, I was kind of like, okay, this feels a little bit stagnating, kind of, or feel like what else can I do?
mm,
And so I was here for about like 3 weeks or something, 3 or 4 weeks, and then I decided to just come up to the center and get to know everyone at the center a little bit more. Here at the church, and I'd heard about they have like a driving program, and was interested in volunteering for that, and so I did, and I started just driving here for McShin, and that turned out to be like something that I really enjoyed because it allowed me to get very close with a lot of the participants here.
a little one-on-one
A lot
windshield time with them.
a lot of these people that I was either living with or living very close to. We got really close, and that was super nice.
Yeah.
Because one, I felt like I was finally, doing something within recovery that kind of gave me purpose. But also I, was just like more secure. It helped me get more secure because I was spending so much time.
You're being a service too, man. Like I
Yeah.
remember the first night out of Tucker's for me. Like, you went and grabbed my meds for me, like, and
Mhm.
I hadn't had my meds for like 48 hours, and I was kind of like out of Tucker's, just done hallucinating for those 10 days that I was in there. I was in there for
Yeah.
18 days, but
Oh
like, it was,
yeah, I
dude,
remember that.
it was crazy, man. And like, I know that like it was late, and you kind of just went out of your way and went to go grab my meds, man. That meant a lot to me,
Yeah, no, I mean,
So
I
yeah,
absolutely loved it. Like the whole kind of rigmarole of it. Like I, was starting to create really good bonds with all the people at New York House, and so that was always fun. Going home there and just like being busy here, doing stuff. Like it just felt good.
just getting involved, yeah.
Mhm. And so I just continued doing that. Like I just continued spending my time up here helping out, and I did the peer coach training or
The peer recovery.
not
Oh, the recovery coach training,
the
yeah.
recovery coach training first. And that was cool. And then a few months after that, Jesse was telling me about, and at this point I was doing more. I was like doing the coordinating. I was coordinating the driving.
Mm.
And he told me about the peer recovery specialist training. He said, like, you should do it. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And that was a really good training. I enjoyed it a lot because it taught me most of what it taught me was about like just what language I use.
Mm.
When talking, like specifically when I'm in the role of like helping connect someone else to services or helping, be be a mentor or be like a support specialist
Mm.
for people that I'm with. But also it was really good for just like understanding a little bit more about what the recovery process looks like, and so it helped me internally, like
That's
look at
exactly what it
myself
is,
through a
yeah.
lens,
Yeah.
through a different lens of why I chose to get into recovery and like what my processes look like so
Mm.
far. But this was also around this same time that I was doing this training. I remember I had been talking with my brother a lot, and I had been telling him, I'm really enjoying this, but I don't want it to like run out. I don't want to, just like eventually um, feel like I'm, bored or something. And I was telling him also how I kind of missed being in school. I kind of I missed it. I did, and he, was encouraging me to apply to university. Told me it'd be, really good for me. He thinks I could get into places, that I'd enjoy it. And I was really hesitant at first, but eventually I did a few applications, and so I was waiting for a while to hear back from them. But ultimately, I got accepted at a couple of universities, but particularly I got accepted at VCU right down the road
Yeah.
from here. And for a while, I wasn't sure because I really enjoyed what I was doing here, and like it was. I feel like because at the time when I first came, I had just turned 19, literally like a week and a half before I got here, um, and it's like I don't I haven't met a lot of other 18, 19, 20-year olds that really rooted themselves in recovery and would say that like
Very far in between, yeah. Very rare to,
yeah,
yeah.
but that would say that like, oh, the year that I spent living in, uh, recovery housing and working up at an RCO was the best year of my life, and I
Mm.
had so much fun. But that's what like to tell people, and that's how I really think. Because honestly, I mean, I had so much fun like
Yeah.
living here, and I just enjoyed it so much. I was able to heal, I was able to grow, make really good relationships, be a part of a community.
Mm.
And like really that's what it was like. It was a safe place for me, and that's why I was able to enjoy myself and have a lot of fun. And I think the fun part of it was like that I got close with so many people.
Yeah. McShin's pretty good about creating an environment where you could heal and recover, and they let you just be you. and they're not very like, we support all pathways. So
Yeah.
whatever recovery looks like for you, they're okay with that as long as you're doing the right thing, and that's what's really cool about this organization.
Yeah, it's nice. So yeah, I mean, for a while I was, just still doing my thing here, unsure about whether I was going to go to university or not. But eventually, I decided, like, yeah, I'll try it. I think I should do it because I had to make a decision
Yeah.
about whether I was going to go or not. And I had talked to Tom Bannard, who runs the Rams and Recovery program at VCU, and he encouraged me a lot. He said, I think you'd enjoy it up here, and I think, from what you told me about why you were thinking about getting back in school, that you would enjoy it. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And so I had accepted, to go to the university, and I was kind of looking forward to that. Also had some anxiety about it. And and this was about like March, April time of 22, I guess. And my brother was living up in Boston at the time, and he wanted me to go visit, and then visit up there for a little bit, and then help him move down to Richmond. And so I moved out of the recovery house in here, and I didn't necessarily want to. Like, I didn't. It wasn't like I need to get out of here or I'm tired of this, but I felt that I was ready to, and that also, like, I saw so many other people coming in. And my thing is, like, all the houses are really good, but New York House especially is like a very good house. I mean, we live there together. Like,
Yeah, that was the first when I finished with the 28-day program, I went and moved into New York House, and it was an awesome house, man. Like, not only was it a nice house, like physically, it looked like, but it was a good group of guys in there, and it was we had fun in there, man. Like, we joked, and we kept things light, and everyone was respectful. It was a cool experience. Yeah.
We always came straight though. Like, we
Yeah.
always came correct.
Yeah.
We kept each other
accountable. Yeah, we held each other accountable. We all did the right thing. We were all doing what we were supposed to do, and which makes it even it was a good experience to be able to still have fun while doing the right thing.
Yeah. For sure. So yeah, I mean, I was recognizing, so many new people were coming in to McShin, going through the intensive, and getting ready to live in the sober living portion of the program. And I knew that I was getting ready to go to Boston for a while, visit my brother, and that I had school coming up, and so I moved out, and I kind of stopped volunteering up here as much. Like, I told Jesse what was going on a couple weeks beforehand, and he told me that's cool. And so I moved out, and I was at my dad's temporarily. But also a positive thing, I hadn't really talked about this, is he had stopped drinking, kind of like on his own. And this was probably about a year and a half before I stopped using. But he had some stuff go on in his life, and so he started to stop drinking, and then he cut out the drugs slowly. And so now today, like, he's very stable, and he's enjoying his life a lot, and he's a lot more healthy. And I actually have a relationship with him for the first time in my life.
That's awesome.
But I felt like his household was, what was safe to go to, because he was clean, and he was mentally well and whatnot. So I went there, and then I was there for a little bit, and then I went up to Boston to visit my brother, and that was a really good trip. And then I helped move him back down to Richmond because he was getting ready to move to Paris, so he needed to get all of his stuff to Richmond, and then go to Paris, and then that was right in the middle of summertime, because I spent a bunch of time with him and his fiance, because we hadn't been in the same state, like lived in the same state for a number of years at that point, and we're very close. And so I was spending a lot of time with him and the rest of my family, and then it was getting ready to be time for
No
for
school.
uni to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was pretty scared because
Yeah.
I hadn't done any school at this point in like, pretty much 2 years. Actually done school in pretty much 2 years, and I had never really done university level classes. I'd taken community college level classes, but I always thought like either they were online or they were dual enrollment, so it wasn't the same. And I was just like, man, I'm not going to fit in. Like, I'm not going to be able to do the academic. Like, I'm not going to be good enough at the academics. I'm not going to fit into the social scene because everyone drinks and everyone parties, and that's not what I do. All my friends are, older than me, and we don't do drugs, we don't drink,
Yeah.
And I was just worried, but I just relied on the faith I have in my recovery and the strength that I have in my recovery to, say like this is an experience that I want to have, and I think it could be a good one if I make it a good one.
Yeah.
And so I registered. I registered for these two classes that were, really good for me. One of them was a nursing class. It was like a nursing elective, and it was conceptualizing mental illness in Western culture. That's what the name of it was. And so essentially, what the class was, it wasn't like just reading over the DSM and learning the DSM. It was a conversation about mental illness and mental health here in the West, and it was a good class because we would talk about substance use and addiction, but we'd also talk about the co-occurring disorders.
Awesome. That's so you're able to understand it a little bit better and a little
Yeah.
deeper.
And then I also took a 1-credit UNIV class called the Science of Recovery, and the Lauren Powell teaches that class, and she's also she works at the Ramsey Recovery Center too. And so I was able to take these two classes that to me were interesting and could relate to my recovery. One of the classes was taught by one of the people that works at the Ramsey Recovery program, which I'm a part of, and I would spend time at. And so I still had my community here at McShin. I just wasn't living in it and spending as much time in it, but I was able to start, building up a community, integrating into a community there at VCU because I had, the Ramsey Recovery program is a very solid program, and I can feel safe there.
Yeah. And for the people that are listening or watching and don't know, VCU is Virginia Commonwealth University here in Richmond. And so that's pretty cool. So you were able to transition into Rams in recovery and kind of bridge that gap right there.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of just to, because we're at the hour mark already, just to kind of wrap things up. So today, from just talking to you and hearing, seeing you, bumping into you every once in a while, it seems like you're doing pretty well. You got 19 months, in recovery now, and you are on a break from school right now.
Yeah, right now I'm on the winter break, I guess.
Okay.
Starting back in about a week and a half.
But school's going good.
Yeah, school's going great.
Grades are good.
Got all A's last semester. I enjoyed it.
Straight A's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'll use that in the title. From drug addiction to straight A's.
Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling blessed every day.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very strong in my recovery, and I'm very happy. I appreciate you having me on today. It's always
absolutely,
a pleasure
man.
just talking to you, and it's cool to get to do this. And yeah, I mean, it's really just I've just stuck to it, and I think what I like to resonate, or what I would like to resonate with people is that recovery goals are very important, but also recovery can be fun. Recovery is not dim. It's not scary. It's it's something where I genuinely have a lot of fun. I feel very relaxed, and I feel safe when I'm when I'm practicing my recovery lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's important to let people know, especially the younger people. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.
So next week on Tuesday, we'll be back at the jail, Henrico East Jail, and we're going to be having Brandon Novak come out and speak to the inmates. So tune in for that one. That'll be Tuesday the 10th at 5:30 p.m. So check that one out. That one will be live. And we appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you, and stay in the herd.